Now to Steve Ratner's favorite story of the morning. Senator Elizabeth Warren maintains her status among the top-tier Democratic White House hopefuls, hitting her stride with first-time donors, her campaign reported yesterday. In an email to donors, the Massachusetts senator announced raising $19.1 million in the past 3 months from 384,000 donors, more than 80% of whom had never given before. Warren has $19.7 million in cash on hand, with an average contribution of $28. The massive haul answers skeptics who questioned whether her pledge not to court wealthy donors would put her campaign at a disadvantage, noting a massive spending push across multiple early voting states in the past 3 months. Warren's second quarter donations put her behind Mayor Pete Buttigieg, who has reported the largest of the quarter so far, despite a lag in poll numbers, and former Vice President Joe Biden as well. However, she outraised Senator Bernie Sanders' established machine of small dollar donations and Senator Kamala Harris's post-debate boost. So incredible numbers, Joe. Yeah. Elizabeth just seems to be like, you know what? She just keeps going, moving forward with that message and not listening to her critics.
Well, you know, we were talking about it when she was down low in the polls, and we kept saying we couldn't understand why her poll numbers were dragging behind, because we thought she was doing everything right. She was working hard. She was holding a lot of town hall meetings. Yep. She had a very narrowly focused campaign message. She stuck to it, and she showed extraordinary discipline out on the campaign trail. I think I referred to it as the blocking and tackling. She was doing the blocking and tackling of politics exactly right. We now see these are sort of lagging indicators of how people were actually paying attention to all the things she was doing right, because she's gone up in the polls, but she's also, her fundraising haul, it's pretty extraordinary. And Steve, it does prove your point, something that you've said throughout this process, that yes, the bundlers are so important, the big money givers are so important, but just as important, these candidates' ability to raise a lot of money actually online. And Elizabeth Warren's numbers, boy, very dramatic because not only did she easily bypass Kamala Harris, but also Bernie Sanders. Who would have believed that several months ago?
Yeah, Joe. Well, first, I think you were exactly right when you talked about the fact that people were paying attention to her on the campaign trail. And she did something that, honestly, I would not necessarily have predicted, which is she went kind of through the policy door. Her mantra was, I have a plan. Her famous refrain has become, I have a plan. She has a plan for everything. We may or may not like it or agree with it, but it seems that the public has bought into that idea that she is someone with ideas who's going to get things done. And secondly, to your other point about where the money came from, it is a fact that she raised this from individual donors. She's had something like 450,000 unique individual donors in this campaign. And just to put that in a frame of reference, as everyone I think knows, you needed 65,000 donors to get on the debate stage for the first debate, 130,000 to get it on the second debate. And so she has massively outperformed those criteria. And another factoid for you, her average donation was about $28. For Mayor Pete and for Biden, the average donation was about $49. And so obviously they were depending more on big money. The only one who was below her was actually Sanders at $18. So he still very much is getting that money from the people. But when you sum this all up, I think what you see now is that within that progressive wing of basically Sanders and Warren, it's clearly Warren who now has the momentum.
And let's put up those numbers one more time, Willie, and we look at them. And these numbers for the top five certainly match who's doing the best in polling, other than Mayor Pete at the top. But you've got Mayor Pete, Joe Biden, Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, and Kamala Harris, and then a massive drop-off. Boy, it's going to be next to impossible to get to the third quarter for some of these candidates. that aren't getting above $2 million.
Yeah, we saw Eric Swalwell already drop out yesterday. I think you'll see more in the month or so ahead, maybe after the next debate at the end of this month. But I think, Steve, and you are absolutely right, Joe, about Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders, Eddie, had to wake up to those numbers from Elizabeth Warren yesterday and go, whoa. She raised a lot of money.
Yeah.
She did it in really small donors. I think some people thought it was a stunt maybe when she started her campaign and said, I'm not going to do any fundraising. I'm not going to be calling rich people. It's not how we're going to run the campaign. Well, it's working. And she's going out there on the stump every day. She's not been particularly flashy. She's not having viral moments like some of the other candidates have. And she's out there doing the work. It's showing up in the polls first and now showing up in fundraising.
And I remember around this table, we were worried and concerned that she was burning through her cash in the early part of her campaign, that she wouldn't be able to last this long. So I think what we see is, in some ways, that cadre, that organizing public that Bernie Sanders had, right? That those folks who were always already engaged are now really looking to her, looking towards her, and looking towards him. I mean, she didn't kind of outraise him by a significant number. So I think what we see across those numbers is a real excitement among the Democratic base. About 95.1 million total, right, divided among all of them. So we see an excitement among the Democratic base. What they're going to choose, who they're going to choose, is going to be really interesting coming down the pipe.
There's also, Willie, a strong message in Elizabeth Warren's campaign for the rest of the candidates in the field, and it is, she's talking about the future.
Yes.
Here's a plan for the future, not where we've been, where we are going.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And here's the thing about her message. I mean, with Elizabeth Warren, first of all, she loves this. She loves doing the town halls. She loves the whole process. She really loves what she's doing. She's a really nice person on top of it, which helps. I'll also say that on the debate stage, the optics completely worked for her. She was in the middle of the stage. She owned her space. And some could argue she even looked presidential. It's her story. Her message is her story. She actually chose her education around her message, around her life story, around the issue of bankruptcy and the little guy getting screwed. And she delivers that message every day. And she cuts through things like, we talked yesterday about those mobility numbers where people think we're doing perhaps better than they really are in terms of how well they're going to do in the future. People are listening to her message and they're doing the math. And then they're making donations. And here you see these numbers.
One other thing, Mika, that's, I think, very important. People have already forgotten, a lot of people have already forgotten it. Donald Trump has already taken her on.
Yeah.
Donald Trump has already attacked her. Donald Trump has already ridiculed her, mocked her, and in fact was saying, maybe I attacked her too early because she's collapsed in the polls. No, she's already taken the hit head on from Donald Trump, and guess what? It had no impact on her. That's something that Donald Trump needs to be concerned about, because now she's immunized from those attacks.
Absolutely. Still ahead on Morning Joe. Yesterday we learned that the British ambassador to the U.S. called the Trump White House inept and uniquely dysfunctional in leaked private cables. For that, the White House disinvited the ambassador from a special dinner last night for the Emir of Qatar. But there was someone who did attend the dinner who caught people's attention. We'll tell you who that was. But first,
thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.